The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, that speech would have had much more credibility about work and job growth if it came from a member of a party that actually supported job growth. Because they oppose every single thing that the government is doing, and the largest single thing they have done is signed the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Now, I thought that party believed in jobs and growth, believed in trade, a small open nation wanting to trade with the rest of the world. But no, in opposition, they oppose. At least we've got to give them credit for that. They are certainly good at opposing, because they oppose every good thing that's going on. And if that member really wanted to talk about the future of work, let's talk about the future of jobs under a framework that didn't have New Zealand in the TPP, because it's a pretty scary scenario. Let's take this. In Japan, at the moment, there is New Zealand lamb and Australian lamb. Both attract a 38.5% tariff into that country. If Australia joined the TPPA over time, their tariff would be reduced and then eliminated. It's an absolutely accurate analysis that brings home the folly of the Labor Party's opposition to TPPA. Because in a future that had Australia in and New Zealand out, New Zealand lamb would be 38.5% more expensive to the Tokyo shopper. Which lamb is going to be bought? It's a pretty simple mathematical equation. And any party that purports to support jobs for our young Maori in freezing works and on farms, but can't support TPPA, has no credibility on this subject, Mr Speaker. Now, one of the other discussions that's been going on over the last few months is whether the strong, positive net migration that we have right now is a good thing or a bad thing. And one of the sad parts about that discussion is that certain people, including in this House, confuse migration with immigration and immigration with residency, and they are not the same thing. When the Labor Party left office, for every Kiwi arriving home to New Zealand, there were 2.5 Kiwis leaving for the long term. Now, for every Kiwi that is leaving, one is coming home. And that is a sign of strength. It's a sign and a contribution to the positive net migration, but it's a sign of success, not failure. The overseas workers coming in is also a sign of success, because we have a growing economy and we are struggling to fill the jobs that are available. Now, I accept that there is a mismatch. We have a hardcore unemployed that the Minister of Social Development and I are working extremely hard with employers to make sure that they are at the front of the queue for jobs. But there is no doubt that if we want to rebuild Canterbury, if we want to support the Hort and Vitt sector, which is growing gangbusters, even in the dairy sector we still rely on Labor, we are going to need smart immigration policy to do that. And I challenge those members on the other side to go to employers and convince them that it's easy to recruit an overseas worker, because it's not. There is no evidence that this policy is suppressing wages.
Order. I've warned a particular member once. He has just continued right throughout question time and now throughout the general debate. Reasonable interjection throughout a robust debate I'll accept, but a continual barrage like that I'm getting will leave me no choice but to be asking the member to leave. The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There is no question that there is a concern about the labour market effects of migration policy. But we need to be very careful not to be the xenophobic ranters that some people are on the other side. Good migration policy contributes very strongly to this economy, and a strong economy contributes to good immigration policy. It's a feeding cycle. But the question of how many people are coming and gaining residence is a confusing one, because if you listen to the rants on the other side, you would think there are these floods of overseas people coming in and gaining residence. Nothing could be further from the truth. The highest residencies granted in this country were 10 years ago, when the Right Honourable Winston Peters was Minister of Foreign Affairs in a Labor-led government. That number of residencies dropped 20% and is now recovering from that historic low. It is hard to believe, given the rants that we hear from the other side. 52,000 residencies were granted at that time. It dropped to 42. It's going up to 47. Good economies, strong economies, need good immigration policy.